Hey everybody, welcome back to Wonderland TCG. My name is Neko Wonderland, and today I have Bones with me,
Hi, what's up?
and also Riley.
Hello.
And today we are going to be bringing you the second episode of the series that I have dubbed Ranking of Commanders, where we are taking practically every commander in CDH, past and present, and giving our thoughts on them and ranking them against each other. We are looking at how these decks might be able to do in a tournament, give our thoughts about how they perform. For example, S tier are the powerhouses of the format, the decks that will constantly perform, get those placements, get those wins. A, strong decks that can also place, but not as frequently. B, decks that are a little less powerful, but can surprise you and still take the W. C, decks that struggle a bit more, but can still get there, have gotten there in the past. D, decks that our strategies we're not really a huge fan of, but can still get there, can still see some play. And F, decks we're a bit more critical of, decks we may not necessarily recommend playing, but can get the occasional win. As always, all these rankings are our opinion. We could totally be off base, but we are just giving our honest thoughts about how we've seen the decks perform and how we think they will perform. If you disagree, as always, direct all complaints in the comments towards Bones, and he will be happy to answer each and every one of them.
What? Wait a second. First of all, if you comment something negative, I'm going to start reading it, notice it's negative, and immediately switch to a different comment. Second of all, any complaints you have are wrong because everything we say is objectively the truth. Anyway, you can continue.
But honestly, a good pilot can take any of these decks, for the most part, to great success. And though we may be more critical and even say a deck is bad, it doesn't necessarily mean it is bad. But let's jump right in, and we're going to start with Thrasios Dargo. So Thrasios Dargo has gotten some recent success. Teamer colors, which is interesting, and seeing Thrasios paired with Dargo. What are people's thoughts on that?
I think Thrasios Dargo is probably one of the more interesting teamer commanders. I feel like it does have a lot of interesting stuff. You do get a lot of the really good Dargo technology. Like Dargo with green, you get like Greater Good, which is one of the like best Dargo cards you can be running. You have blue for protection. You have Thrasios for grind. There's a few different ways you can take it. Teamer Thrasios in general is probably the best thing you could be doing in Teamer, in my opinion. And Dargo, of all the options, is honestly probably my favorite. I feel like it's just, there's a lot of interesting ways you can take it. It's a fun deck to pilot. And I think, like, if you're looking at Teamer Thras, this is, like, a really good option. Or if you're just, like, looking at Teamer in general.
I think Bones covered all the big points. You have great tools. Your colors are fantastic. You have access to Dockside.
Yeah, that's huge.
So it's a strong deck, and the hands of a good pilot, it's like literally terrifying. I think it could easily go into A tier.
I think I agree with that. I think A tier is very fair for this deck. I think it is very, very reasonable.
Okay, I'm actually surprised both of you started with A there. For my part, I do really like this combination. I do know that what Dargo offers is infinite potential, a lot of great combinations for infinite mana, especially when you bring in things like Phyrexian Altar and Bergi. And Thrasios is a great partner because it gives you a way to use that mana. It gives you a place to dump it, draw your deck, and win with something like Thassa's Oracle or Finale of Devastation. And like you said, it has all the good creatures that you want in an option like this. Plus gives you the control strategy, the ability with Thrasios to be a bit more mid-rangey if you need to. You're both saying A. I personally think it's B, but I'm comfortable putting it towards the bottom of A.
That's good by me.
Yeah, bottom of A is fine.
Bottom of A it is. It has won some tournaments, so it does get that recognition. And same with Atraxa, I think it started a pretty breakout performance. Dargo is one of those commanders too that, while not groundbreaking despite his size, is one that will surprise you every once in a while. He'll come out with like some new combination and get some good results. And this new iteration, I really enjoy.
I was gonna say actually, it's a shame that Maddie's not here right now because, she's like the Dargo expert. But having played against so much Dargo, playing against her and against other Dargo decks, the commander is capable of some really interesting lines. There's some real scary stuff it can do. It's a sack outlet in the command zone. It enables some like interesting storm. I was talking about Greater Good. Greater Good becomes 1 red mana, draw 7, discard 3, which is why I mentioned I really like the deck running it. Because if you have something like Bergie, you mentioned, you just draw your deck. There's just a lot of really interesting Dargo specific tech. And being high on Dargo, I feel like Thrasios is one of the best partners you could pair him with.
The results don't lie, so I think it's got a pretty good spot there. We can move on to our next commander then. Derevi, Imperial Tactician. So right away it's banned. It's a very old commander, one that has had a lot of success in CDH before, I think. Kind of dipped down, but has had almost a resurgence, at least for a brief moment recently.
So when I first started playing Magic, I thought Derevi was like the hot shit. Like, oh, you never have to pay for commander tax. Oh, you can always just, play Derevi for 4, and you can play him at instant speed. I thought Derevi was one of the best commanders. I've since learned the error of my ways, and Bant is not a great color combination. The ways that you win in Bant are not really propelled forward by anything Derevi does.
Mm-hmm.
Derevi, it's just not so easy to further your own game plan. So it's kind of weird because usually Derevi has been known for being a stacks deck, to use stuff like the Winter Orb, Static Orb, Stasis, stuff like that. But I don't think that it functions that well because Stacks is incredibly hard to pilot. And the main problem I see with hard Stacks decks is that you need to be in the driver's seat of the game the entire game if you want to win, because it's very difficult to play from behind with stacks. And if even one person slips out from underneath you, then you've probably lost the game.
And at least in Derevi's case, there is blue, so if someone does try to slip out, you have the backup, maybe counter potential. But other than breaking parity under himself, he doesn't offer too much else. No card advantage. You can use his ability and take advantage of it to win the game, but you need other pieces to do that. It's almost like Sisay in a lot of ways. Captain Sisay is actually probably the main win con of the deck. And in this case, the deck almost seems worse, even though it has blue now. Sisay is the tutor, and having that in the command zone instead, I think, is stronger, despite being less colors. Having the ability to replay Derevi for that flash, like you mentioned, Riley, and also just pay that consistent cost without having to worry about commander tax, it's nice, but I don't know how relevant it is in CDH.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I mostly agree with Riley on this one. It's no secret I'm not very high on Bant. Derevi in the command zone doesn't really offer that much. I mean, Derevi is an impressive card. I mean, you look at Derevi in the 99 of something like Nagila, and it's like, oh, this card's kind of gas. It's also very, very hard to be in a blue-green X 3 color pair. because you have to compete with Thras X, the best thing you can be doing in this colors.
I think that Derevi would slot right in between Azami and Kulain, and they can just be band buddies right there in the bottom of D tier.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. It's funny. When the tournaments changed to the 90 minutes, no turns, for one tournament, we saw this deck have 3 players bring it in a Chaos tournament. And since that tournament, I haven't seen it any other time. So I think people wanted to try it. They found out the deck probably doesn't do it anymore either. So I think between those two is still really good.
It's just kind of sad. Like I said it a lot last episode, but it's like power creep in the format has sort of made a lot of these initial like early format commanders that were like, this is a crazy, scary, good commander you can be playing at this point in time. And it's like, I'm not really that worried about you anymore.
I agree. Power creep is real, and I don't think this deck, or necessarily these colors, even have what it takes right now. But moving on to something a bit newer and maybe in some stronger colors, we have Dahada. So I'm going to start with Dahada because I have some opinions. Love Dahada in the 99 of Sisay. As a commander, I'm not hot on her at all. The main reason is that she is a planeswalker that comes down and cannot protect herself. Unlike Tevesh, she doesn't make any bodies, so you're playing her at 4 CMC, with 3 of those being mana pips, and just hoping that it survives, which in most cases isn't going to be likely. Likewise with Dahada, her relevant ability is the minus ability, which means you minus her, making her easier to kill, and you can really only do it once. Yes, when you do it, you can fill your bin, and there are cool things you can do with that. If, say, you have like a top deck tutor, down tick Dahada, put it into your graveyard, and do something with it there. And you do get treasures, so she almost refunds her costs, but I don't think she's the commander in these colors. I think there are better options. I think even Alesha's better in this strategy, but what are other people's thoughts?
So I'm actually a bit higher on Dihada than you are. I think the commander does have some stuff it can do. You mentioned killing Dihada. Honestly, I found in practice that killing Dihada isn't even really that good of a move because the Dihada player wants the Dihada to die so that they can recast her, get more treasures, do whatever, and get her ready to be recast for the breach lines. The thing about Dahada is that it is just Underworld Breach the deck, right? Like you play these weird combo. Like there's a line with like Heart of Karen if you want to run that. There's a line with just the OG Flicker, and it's all about milling yourself, getting treasures, doing stuff with Breach. So being so all in on one strategy, even one as strong as Breach, does give yourself a little bit of the transparency that this is what my deck does. I am doing this right away. And that makes it a bit easier to play against. So I think it has that going against it. But I do think that it can be a very interesting turbo strategy. I said this about the last commander, I love repeating myself. It's my favorite thing. But you are in Mardu. Mardu is in the same position as like Bant, in the same position as Teamer, in the same position as every other 3-color deck, where it's like you are competing with Tymna plus Red. And the issue with that is that Tymna is a broken, stupid, OP-ass card. And when you're competing with the commander in the command zone that draws 3 cards a turn, it's very, very hard to justify a commander like this that is very, a one-trick pony. The commander can do stuff. The commander has some gas. I don't think it's as good as other options, and I think it's a little bit transparent in strategy. I mean, you can go to like a local, or you could go to wherever and expect to do good in with Dahada. It's just not something I would want to bring to a tournament, to be honest.
So one thing I would like to mention with Dahada, there is a really cool one card combo with Wishclaw Talisman
Mhm.
where you play the Wishclaw, you tutor for Flicker, you flicker Wishclaw, and then you tutor for Underworld Breach with Wishclaw. And then with Underworld Breach, you can recast the flicker, and then you have assembled your breach line with Bahada. That being said, that takes a lot of mana, and Mardu is not the colors known for making mana quickly. As this was said before with the Derevi, it's much better in the 99 of other decks. In Derevi's case, either 5-color Sisei or Najila, and in Dahada's case, also 5-color Sisei. Just because you have access to more tools that do what you want your strategy to be doing. So I think the limiting factor of this deck is the lack of tools it has.
From what I've seen of the deck, though, when I have seen it played, I often seen Dahada just put onto the board and nothing really else happens after that. Either you down tick her and she sits there, or you try to keep her around and she's killed. And even if she is killed, casting her again for 6 mana only to get 4 mana back, those aren't numbers that add up in your favor in the long run. But where do we want to put her? I'm thinking that she honestly feels right next to Aminatu. I think they both have the same strengths and also the same weaknesses. But what are other people's thoughts?
I would say, like, actually just barely higher in between Bergie and Ukino Kazar, but still like middle to low D tier.
I think I agree with that. I think better than Amanatu, for sure. Yeah. I think better than Amanatu. So in between those works.
I think this just goes to highlight it's a strong deck. It can do stuff. It has really cool lines. So it can compete. It can do its thing. But I think the consistency is where the issue comes from with this deck. But let's move on to another interesting deck, Dina Soul Steeper.
So I'm just gonna say this now. I have only seen this played as stacks. I'm not. I've already made my comments on stacks. I know that there are other builds out there for Dina where it's like Turbo Hulk or Adnaz or something, but I have only seen it played as stacks. So I'm gonna hold most of my comments on this one.
Agree. It has some interesting things it can do. It's not one I've seen super often, but I know it does have a couple of one card win conditions that it can do with things like I never get them right, but like sanguine blood, the ones where whenever you gain a life, you deal 1 damage to your opponent. That an effect like that with Dina will let you create a loop where you just ping everyone down, which I do think is really cool to have that effect in the command zone.
I think it is nice that the commander has, the one card. I think it's nice that it also, does she does the thing with Hulk. I think, being a deck with one card win cons in the command zone is very nice. My main issue is that the commander is a bit. First of all, you're limited to 2 colors,
Mm-hmm.
which is already kind of rough. But also, the commander doesn't really do much outside of the one cards, which is something I don't love. Having a cheap commander has a lot of upside. Like, for example, like Deadly Rock becomes a lot better. So there's that, there's being a one card, there's like cool things you can do with her. I'm just not sure how entirely convinced I am about the commander. I feel like maybe I would put her, if I had to place her, maybe somewhere in the higher D's or like low C or something. That's sort of where I'm thinking. It's hard for me to really talk about how I feel about this one because I feel like she's a weird commander. where it's like I like some of the stuff she's doing, but she has significant downsides. I'm conflicted on this one, basically.
She is weird, and I do think that makes her hard to place. I do like a lot of things about her. Kogari, despite being black and green, which is a strong color combination in a lot of ways, doesn't have too many great CDH commanders, or if they do, they are a bit controversial, let's say, in how people view them. I think Dina provides a lot of strong options. I think a turbo strategy with her could be fun. I do see that there could be maybe some stacks potential, but I also don't see her being able to compete as well. So I'm okay putting her, I think, higher into D tier.
I am thinking probably we're gonna take the spot we just put the last one into, like just above Tejada.
I'm okay with that. I think it showcases the strengths of the deck with that spot. On to another two-color commander, actually. This one, again, really popular in its day. Edric, Spymaster. A deck that has built-in card advantage, lets you play a lot of invasive creatures, which blue-green has a fair amount of, and lets you draw cards off of it.
I am not high on this commander at all. So you mentioned it has a lot of evasive creatures, and for really cheap, like Triton Shortstopper, right? One blue mana, unblockable, so guaranteed to draw you a card every turn unless somebody kills it. That being said, I would never want my hand to be full of one drop creatures that only draw me a card on the next turn. Edric does have some very limited grind potential. The problem is very commander centric. If you don't have Edric out, you have a board full of unblockable 1/1s, and that's not going to win you any games anytime soon. The nice thing about Edric is it usually runs extra turn spells. It usually runs Notorious Strong, which makes you a lot of 1/1s, and it gives you another extra
Yes.
turn. It does have Nexus of Fate loops if you finally get to the point where you're winning. But in order to do that, you have to be able to not lose. And I don't think that Edric has great options in terms of not losing, primarily because of how many cheap unblockable creatures it runs. If you draw like 10 cards in a deck like Blue Farm, people automatically assume on the next time you're able to, you're going to win the game. If you draw 10 cards in Edric, people are probably going to assume you're going to play 5/1/1s. And it's not what I want to be doing. I think it has a lot of the same problems as Zami does, but it does have green. So it is able to ramp at least, but that doesn't fix anything.
I tend to agree. I really don't feel like the commander is very good. All those downsides you mentioned are very legitimate. You're so commander centric. If people know to remove the commander, you're just playing a bunch of dorks that do nothing. You need to be way ahead to start actually winning because your win condition is the extra turn spells. And to win with the extra turn spells, you need a board and you need Edric. And you need to be drawing cards and you need to be controlling the board. And it's like you have to play from ahead in a deck that is so unbelievably focused on having its commander out that people who know to get rid of the Edric will get rid of the Edric. There's also the issue that, we've already talked about how messed up of a card Tymna is. Tymna draws you up to 3 cards by hitting opponents. So now, playing Edric, you are allowing your opponents to draw even more cards when they deal damage because Edric is symmetrical. So naturally, good players will not let you untap with Edric. However, people can take advantage of Edric by drawing a bunch of cards and then removing it. And now you're down your commander that is essential to your strategy, and your opponent just drew 2 cards, or 3 cards, or 4 cards. Like, as a commander, I think, first of all, you're a 2-color commander in a good color pair with way better options, and you are playing a strategy that is both fragile.
One thing that I would like to highlight again, you mentioned it was symmetrical, and so you can't just on turn 3 play Edric and pass, because then your opponents will get the cards and probably remove Edric, and then it will take you 2 more turns or at least 2 more mana to play Edric. And so you need to have a board and then play your commander. And so it just makes it very clunky.
It does, and giving your opponent's cards is never a good thing. It's never what you want to be doing. However, despite that fact, Edric has found its place, or at least it did. I think it was at one point a very strong deck. I think now that there are more creatures in the format, it's become less so, and it's kind of been power crept out. I do think it could still win, and I think there are people who are still trying to make the deck work. Card advantage, even if it is symmetrical, can help you, especially if you built a deck based around taking the most advantage out of it, which this deck does. And I do think the loops that this deck can do with the extra turns really synergistic with the style that it's going for. So I think I like it a little bit more, but I also agree that it's not the best deck anymore.
Before we place it, I'm gonna give like a really hot take real quick. In Simic, if I'm playing one commander, between Edric and all the other options, I would probably play Thrasios without a partner, just because that wouldn't give your opponent's cards.
I agree. I definitely agree.
Okay.
Yeah, we talked about the strengths of the deck and the weaknesses, but I think just needing to point out how bad those weaknesses are needs to happen. So I am not on the deck at all, and I personally would place it in between Brago and Atla.
That low, huh? Okay. I was even I was even teasing the idea of maybe putting it next to Sisay and C. I think that would have been a bit high for it, but in F tier, okay. What do you think, Bones?
I would put Edric right above Brago, to be honest. I agree with Riley. And I was just thinking, I was just thinking, as a Winota player, I don't think there's any commander I'd rather see across the table more than an Edric.
You know what? That's fair. Or maybe, yeah, if you're a Tymna player, if you're a Winota player, you eat this up. And you see those decks a lot. Heck, even Najila. So yeah, those.
Oh my god, Najila.
So I know
Yeah.
that a
You know what?
while
Yeah.
ago Najila's playing Edric in the 99 for a lot of the reasons we mentioned. Like it's really good at drawing cards. It is great at drawing cards. But in 5-color in Najila, the cards you draw are better than anything you could draw in Simic.
Probably because you're not drawing 1/1s for one.
So I don't want to berate the point too much. I think that the realization that this deck feeds probably 3 of the top tier decks in the format right now, a ton of cards, means yeah, it just has to go in F. I do think it can do more than Brago, so I am comfortable putting it above that. But yeah, you've convinced me F tier just for that reason alone.
But wait, Brago just got a new 1 card.
It's still Braga.
It's still Azorius.
You just wait till we get to Shorakai. I'll show you the power of Azorius.
Yes, there is always one that breaks and mold, and Shorakai does it very well. But for the time being, let's move on to Elesh Norn, a mono white commander, pretty new, built as a stacks deck that can take advantage of you doubling your ETB effects while taking them away from your opponent. I like this card. I think that people were back and forth on it, though now that people like Charles have taken this deck and shown what it can do, I like the strategy you have where you can play those cards where it's like ETB, exile one of your opponent's creatures until this leaves the battlefield. Doubling that effect with things like Portable Hole, really strong, and helps not only with your stack strategy, but helps take away things from your opponents, especially when you turn off things like Dockside and Thassa's Oracle, which are the two strongest win cons, or at least two strongest creatures in the format in the 99. So being able to turn those off, yes, you're still in mono white, yes, you're still essentially a win conless stack, but at least your deck, your commander, actively helps with that strategy.
When we were going over the card and explaining, it takes away your ETBs for opponents and it gives you double ETBs. My first thought was, wait, white has ETBs other than like Skyclave Apparition. Again, it's stacks. I'm not so high on stacks, and it is 5 mana. White is not known for being the best at ramp, and in stacks, you want your pieces to come down really early, so that way people get stopped instead of, oh hey, you play a Dockside. Well, now I'm playing the Torpor Orb, and you won't get Dockside again. And like that's not how stacks works. It needs to come down first. And it just being in mono white and 5 mana seems like a lot.
I agree. I will counter though that 5 mana in the current format isn't a lot anymore.
Don't play mono white when come to stacks. Just don't. It's so bad. Okay. I will give Elesh Norn this. If you come to a table and you're like, I'm playing mono white stacks, you could do so much worse than Elesh Norn. Like,
yes.
We talked about Adeline, and Elesh Norn is so much better than Adeline because Elesh Norn has an impact on a CDH table. Elesh Norn is probably, if you're going to play mono white stacks, is one of the better options. Elesh Norn's fine, Heliod's fine, Oswald is the best by far, and then I'm personally a big fan of AO, but mostly because I think that card is sick.
In your little mini tier list of mono white stacks commanders, where would you rank 8.5 tails?
Let's not talk about 8.5 tails.
8.5 tails is sick though, so I don't know what the issue is here. But no, back to Elesh Norn, Bones. Where would you put her?
Back to Elesh Norn. If your name is not Charles Mono White Guy, please do not play mono white stacks. Just don't do it. Just play anything else. Play Elesh Norn in the 99 of Rocco. It's awesome. Don't play Elesh Norn in the command zone. Just don't. I would put it in F tier, right above Adeline, and then I would move Adeline below Atla. I do not like mono white stacks.
I'm hearing a little bit of bias, so I'm gonna throw in my own bias 2 cents. I think instead of putting it right above Adeline, I think the correct place, like without a question, is putting it right above Tymna Armix, just because it does impact a CDH table if it gets going. It has relevant abilities, and mono white there are relevant stacks effects, but winning the game in mono white is difficult, and it does not like do anything to help you win. It just slows the game down to a crawl.
Fair, and that's hard in a tournament setting where you are playing against the clock. So I think, yeah, F tier with the tier list that we're making is pretty good for this commander. I think, yeah, we'll put it on par with Tymna Armix. You can switch it how you like, but around there, top of F for right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to shit on the commander too hard, because I do think there are some cool things you can do in Elesh Norn. Like you mentioned Skyclave Apparition, Portable Hole, like any of those removal effects are very strong. Turning off the ETBs is also very strong. You mentioned Dockside, you mentioned Thoracle. There's all sorts of other things. It stops Kiki-Jiki combos. It stops, I don't know. It stops a very large amount of very relevant effects, right? Your issue is you are playing a monocolored deck that does not really have access to the card draw in the command zone unless you're running like mediocre ETB draw card creatures. You don't really have that advantage that you would want in something like this. It just is a hate piece in the command zone. And if you want that, well, I just wouldn't want that, to be honest. And if you're going to play a mono white deck, this is a pretty good one in comparison to other mono white. It's just, if you are not like, I play mono white, I know how to play mono white, this is my thing, I know the ins and outs of mono white stacks, and I know how to play to the board in a tournament setting, I just wouldn't do it. Because stacks is hard. Stacks is hard, and you're playing a color stack that is very, very limited. So it's just like restricting yourself, and it's like at that point there are better commanders you could be running, for the same strategy. So that's my 2 cents. I don't mean to be too harsh. It's just, if we're talking, this is what you might see in a tournament, this is what you might want to bring, this is what might, like, top 8 or whatever, I don't recommend ever bringing mono white stacks unless you are like a specialist. That's sort of my take on it.
Agree, and I think we all are kind of in that same spot with this deck. So let's move on to our next commander, Elsha of the Infinite. So right away you're in Jeskai colors in a kind of storm-like deck, a deck that can combo off with a card like Sensei's Divining Top and a cost reducer. I think it has a really strong effect on its own too, just being able to play the top card of your deck. I like this commander a lot, actually. I know it's been hurt by things like Drannith Magistrate, but with the inclusion of things like Breach, you have, your intuition piles with Savine's Reclamation, you have Brain Freeze, you have the control aspect, you have access to White, which has a lot of cool toys right now, and silence effects. You have like your Archivists. I like where this commander's at. I know it's not as strong as it might have been once, but I do think it has a lot of potential still.
I think it's interesting you mentioned Drannith because I'm just thinking, when was the last time I saw an Elsha deck? And I don't think I've seen one in about a year or so. And I feel like it's specifically because of stuff like Drannith, because of stuff like Lekru. Just because Drannith is a really good card and probably the most played white card in the CDH format. And when your deck gets hosed by Drannith, you need to figure out how to deal with it. And I don't think that Jeskai has great options to deal with Drannith.
See, I'm of the opposite opinion. I think you're in great colors. You have Bounce. You have Exile. Even, I don't think you would run like Lightning Bolt in the deck, but you should have the burn if you need it to. So I think the colors can do it pretty well, but you're right, Drannith just completely shuts down most of your strategy.
I'm actually a little bit higher on this one. Not higher than Neko, but I do think that the commander has a lot of like gas. I think having the, quote unquote card advantage that comes with having a future sight effect in the command zone in, good colors. Not that Jeskai is like insane or anything, but you could do worse.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you have the colors for removal. You have the colors for card advantage. You have a decent card advantage outlet in the command zone that also, has your combos with top. I don't like that you need to run cost reducers and stuff if you want to do the top combo. I'm not like the highest on this commander or anything, but I do think it has some stuff. It's definitely been hurt a lot by some of the printings you mentioned. Drannith and Oof are very, very impactful.
Mm-hmm.
They are cards that every single deck needs to. If you're not playing them, even if you are playing them, sometimes you need to have a plan for them because they can so easily warp the game around them. It's like, whatever. You know how the effect Drannith and Oof have on games if you play a lot of CDH and you've seen what they do. But again, you're in white, which is the best removal color. You're in red, which is another very good removal color. Genuinely, I am a big fan of literally just actual factual lightning bolt in CDH. So, you're in the colors that do that kind of stuff. But I wouldn't exactly call it like top tier or anything, but I would call it maybe like a C.
Yeah, actually kind of around a C2, honestly. I do think if the deck has the ability to sit back and gain card advantage, it can do it pretty well. I think it can do a pretty okay control strategy. It has Rhystic Study, it has Smothering Tithe, it can still activate top to sort through. I think Counterbalance is a really good card in this deck. So I think it can still do some really nice things, but I think probably mid C. I would say even next to Cormella.
Yeah, I think in between Cormella and Arkham is where I would have put it as well.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think it's still really strong. I think it deserves a bit more attention. I think a good pilot can do really well with this deck. So I want to see it more. But as we move on to another monocolored commander, we have Emry, Lurker of the Loch.
I'm not really a fan of Emry. Mono blue. Y'all might hate this one, but I think mono blue is not great.
No.
Don't at me. I don't like mono blue. And I think Emry sort of has some issues. First of all, like, you're shut off super hard. We literally just talked about Drannith and Oof, and both of those cards literally like annihilate this deck. And you are not in the same colors. You don't have the white or the red to remove them.
Also, Dothiv just annihilates this deck.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Dothy too. Yeah, you're weak to so much hate, so much stacks. You're not doing anything particularly like super strong, to be honest. Like, you have some nice combos, whatever. You have some things you can do. It's not one that really, would ever scare me at a table. It's another one of those commanders that you play and then you need to untap with to do anything. It's one of those commanders that you're like, doesn't really have, I don't know. I guess you have card advantage because you can like do bauble stuff like in Legacy. I don't know. I guess speaking of Legacy, my feeling is like, if you want to play Emry and have it be good, just play 8 casts. I don't know. I'm a hater. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm a hater.
I think
We all know it.
it just folds to way too many things, and the best interaction that Mono Blue has is counter spells. That's an undeniable fact. The problem is stuff like Fierce Guardianship, Miscast, Offer. Those only hit non-creatures, and everything we mentioned that just decimates the deck are creatures. And so the best things it has to deal with problems doesn't deal with the problems it has.
Doesn't deal with those things super well. And I mean, when you look at a commander like this, there is clearly a better artifact themed commander in the same colors that you can use instead. You can get a nice engine with this commander. It has some combos that it can do with 0-cost artifacts. But other than that, it doesn't offer too much of a powerful strategy. It's unique, but not necessarily good. You're limited by your colors, and you're playing something that is hurt by so much and takes so much to get online. With that said, I am feeling like putting this one honestly towards the lower end of F as well.
Yeah, I think probably by Anya Falconwrath.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think that's a good spot. Again, I think you could switch Edric and Emry, but right there is about where we're feeling. So this next commander, I think, is going to be a bit of a hot topic. Urith, the glassiest of glass cannon CDH decks that folds to the faintest of breezes, can go really fast, can get down early and get some really cool engines online, with basic cantrip draw effects, and even faster than Berg, you just go for the hills. But it folds to things like Draneth, Rule of Law effects, and it's a card that, unlike a lot of these commanders where you're simply shut down by a stacks piece, this one actually hurts you, because if you're stacked out and have Europe on the field, you're losing card advantage because those cards are going in exile, you're not getting them to hand, and you're not able to recur them in the graveyard, which hurts things like your Breach.
So I'm just gonna say really quick, I love the batting average of Draneth. Like the past couple, it's just been like Draneth this.
Yeah.
But particularly with Urza, if Urza is on the field and you have a Draneth come down, you are locked out of the game. Like you cannot draw any more cards. You have what is in your hand, and you are at the mercy of the table. And I don't like that. I don't think that's good.
Along with that, too, not only do you have cards in hand, or the cards you had, probably half to 2/3 of those cards are some type of draw effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Earth is one of those commanders that's so cool. Like, going off with Earth, doing the thing, getting the exile billing cards manual storm, it's pretty damn cool. But then you remember that every white deck plays Draneth, half of the green decks play Oof. You cannot really. I mean, obviously, you're not as hurt by Oof as Draneth, but again, it's just one of those commanders that it's very fast, but it's like you said, it's the ultimate glass cannon. You really have to bide your time. Like, if you just play out Earth and pass, you're going to lose. But I feel like with a skilled pilot, and maybe you bribe everybody else at your pod to switch off white, like, you can do things. but that's the issue, right? Like, the issue is you're playing against Blue Farm, or you're playing against, here's a good example, you're playing against Tymna Thras, right? Tymna Thras sees an Aerith at the table, and they're just going to find the Draneth. They're in green, they have all the creature tutors, they put their Draneth on the field, you die. Having some of the best decks in the format that all have these really efficient tutors, really efficient whatever, and you are a deck that cannot really recover from that kind of a scenario. I feel like the glass is a little bit too fragile. You know, you shipped your package, you sent it to the tournament, and it broke in shipping. And maybe you're going to have to return it because it's not, I don't know. This metaphor kind of went off the rails a little bit, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do think that if I see this deck, if anyone sees this deck, they should immediately try to mulligan for their Draneth. I think a lot of decks do that already, but especially here. I will say that I think this is a case too of a card being released at the wrong time. I feel like when Uruf was released, the meta was a lot more stacks focused, a lot more stacks dedicated decks. And the meta, I feel like, has kind of shifted more to the mid range or turbo again, or at least recently. Decks still run stacks, but they're more stacks light. So I think there are windows where this deck can do its thing. I think it's pretty infrequent, and I think it's very pilot and also opponent centric in that idea. But I think a lot of people tried the deck, weren't happy, gave up on it. And if the card was released today, I'm curious to see if it would have had the same result. I think it probably would have, but I think we would have at least seen a little bit more of it, at least for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With that being said, I am comfortable putting this commander, despite all its many flaws. I honestly am tempted to put it at the bottom of D tier, or maybe even top of F.
I was actually thinking D. I mean, it's not a bad deck. It's just a horrendously positioned one. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, you can go crazy with Aruth. You can play an Aruth and cast a breakthrough and go batshit crazy. but damn, it's hard out there.
It's hard being a Storm player in this economy.
Real.
I I really like F tier. I think we need to pad that out a bit more. Uh, F is my favorite number. Uh, so yeah, probably top of F tier for me.
I think top of F tier is fine for this card. I think it will stay at the bottom of D tier. I don't think it can go any higher. So top of F is fine. Though if Draenith ever does get banned, a lot of decks will improve, but this deck will really shoot up there.
Yeah, if Draenith ever gets banned, that would change so much.
But with Urza out of the way, we're gonna move on to our last commander for this episode. Or should I say commanders, as we have Tymna Malcolm. Tymna Malcolm is an Esper commander that really thrives with the mid-range strategy. You have a commander that lets you draw cards based off attacking your opponents and dealing them damage. And you have another commander that also benefits from attacking, but also has flying. So you can play Malcolm turn 1, play Tymna turn 2, have a flying attacker that can hit into most people, and you draw at least one card, and you get a treasure off it. Really, really good value.
Yeah, I actually quite like these commanders. I can talk about why Tymna is one of the best cards you could be playing in your command zone in CDH for a very long time. And if you're playing Esper I think is actually a pretty decent color combination. And if you're playing Esper, Tymna X is a pretty good place to be.
Mm-hmm.
You have some of the most efficient win cons in the format, obviously in your historical consultation. You have, like you said, an evasive Tymna attacker in the command zone that ramps you very strong. You can generally just play, you can go a bit slower if you want, be a little bit more controlling, draw cards with Tymna, get your mana. The biggest downside is that you sadly don't get red, so you can't run Glinthorn. I feel like this deck with Glinthorn would be like awesome, but that's neither here nor there. I think this is a pretty good color pairing. It's just if you want to play some generic Esper value pile, this is a pretty good place to be. Tymna in the command zone, pretty good. A+, good job. Good deck, pretty good deck. Does what you need it to do in the Esper color pie.
I think that the commander pairing is really good. They synergize well together. In Esper, you have a lot of efficient win cons, and it can either go with a more turbo strategy or a more grindy mid-range strategy, and it's very easy to pivot between the two. I don't know. Just overall, I like the pair. If I didn't play my main deck, I would probably be playing this one.
It's a good solid deck, good solid colors. You have access to Thoracle, Mnemonic Betrayal, a deck that you can just sit back, grind through the mid game if needed. I don't know. Yes, you're in turbo colors almost. I don't know how well the deck turbos overall, but it's an option, I guess. Yeah, I like this pairing. I like these colors. I don't think it's the pinnacle of these colors. I think we'll talk about a commander I like a bit more, but it's strong. It's gotten results.
I think that's very fair. I think this is a very strong pairing, and I think it's a very reasonable thing to bring to a tournament, honestly. Like, if I had to choose a spot for this commander based on how we've sort of been tiering, how we've been defining tiers, I feel like I would put this commander in A, to be honest.
I actually am going to go against the trend of putting everything in F tier. I think that this one is a really good contender for our second S tier deck.
Interesting. Okay. I think I like it more than some of the other commanders we have in A already. I don't think it quite gets there into the S bracket for me. It does a lot of things very, very well, but I don't look at this deck the same way I look at Blue Farm. This feels like a much smaller mountain to have to beat. in most situations.
I'm just laughing at the I'll break the trend of putting it in F. I'll put it in D instead. That's pretty fair.
Riley, a girl of only extremes.
It's either an F or an S. That's fair.
Nothing in between. Who needs these other fluff
yeah.
categories? Get them out of here. So I think for right now, I'm okay putting it in top of A. I think with the current metagame, I like it more than Pod.
Top of A is fine. Like, I would have put it in like bottom of S tier, but top of A is close enough.
Yeah, it's right there.
I think it could go either way. I do think if I'm looking at the current list of commanders in A, it probably goes to top of A. And you were comparing it to, what's it called? Sans Blue Pod. And I think the reason I'd put it above that is if you're going to be 4-color, having access to blue is so strong. And it's the same thing with 3-color, right? Like blue and black are, some of the best supporting colors you can have if you're going to have like a multicolor deck. Same goes for, white is also very strong with supporting color. It's not, as strong. You don't bring in as many things from them, but you still have really strong things like Ranger Captain. You have your silences, your Esper Sentinel. So I feel like Esper is in a really decent place, especially with a commander like Tymna that can keep your hand really full. And I think having access to counter spells and Thassa's Oracle does put it above Sans Blue for me. Blue-black is probably the best 2 colors you can put into your multicolor deck right now, just because of the efficiency of win conditions. Obviously Oracle Consult, but Mnemonic Betrayal, I think, is genuinely one of the really, like if I'm rating win cons, I genuinely put Mnemonic Betrayal pretty high. So having access to like 2 really strong win cons, among other win cons you could be running, is just good. You're in a good spot.
So as we come to a close, there is one piece of old business that we want to address. We have a commander here in C that, after some discussion in between episodes, we feel should actually be a little bit higher. And of course, we're talking about Cormella. We've talked about it, and we like the deck. We think it has some strengths. So with that in mind, we're actually going to bump it up to the bottom of B tier.
Yeah, that feels right.
It does. It does feel right. I'm happy there. We won't talk more about the commander because we did that on the last episode, but the strategies that it presents, I think, are really strong and kind of place it above some of the other commanders already in C. So with that being said, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you had a great time and hope you join us as we continue this series of Ranking of Commanders.
Bye!